Welcome everyone, and delighted to welcome you to what is the first of many sessions that we're going to be delivering as part of the University's Exeter Future of Work programme, and delighted that we have such an array of great speakers and experts who are going to be able to give us an insight into some of the world of work issues that are currently emerging. And before we go on to the formal introductions, I'll just give you a bit of context in terms of what the Future of Work programme is about, if you've not heard about it before. Matt, do you want to give us the next slide, please? So if this is the first you've heard about it, you'll be hearing a lot more over the next few weeks, and especially over the Easter period. So the Future of Work Spring programme is a way of basically giving our students lots of additional opportunities of gaining experiential learning experiences, attending skills sessions, employer webinars, and virtual experiences as well. We're painfully aware that many of you won't be able to access conventional placements, many of the exciting interventions that we normally deliver, like global leaders and pathways. But we have made an effort, a special effort with our providers and service providers to convert these into virtual experiences. So these will be running throughout the spring term, and then that will culminate in an exciting interactive global hackathon for a full week, where you'll be addressing various future work themes like globalization, global citizenship, skills and behaviors, and the modern working place. So if you're familiar with Grand Challenges and the online version, Challenges Online, that's basically the format, and it'll be high energy and really exciting, and it'll give you an opportunity to make new friends as well as engage with students from around the world. So hopefully the benefits are obvious. They'll give you a significant understanding about how the world of work is changing, improve your intercultural awareness, give you an opportunity to engage in some exciting interactive learning experiences, and above all, prepare you for the workplace when you enter it, and give you some real evidence and useful content for your CV and job applications. So I'll give you a quick reminder of some of the activity that we're going to deliver at the end. But Matt, if you can come on to the next slide. Thank you. So in terms of the Leaders Forum, as I said, really excited. I have my dream team of speakers that are going to help provide an insight into how the world of work is changing, not least the obvious impact that we've had from the pandemic, which is obviously increasing the speed and the rate at which technology is entering our working lives. So I'm just going to go through and introduce colleagues, and then they're going to explain the kind of work that are involved and the area of their organisation in terms of the brief and so on, and how this might be relevant to you. So first off, we have Helen Brand, who's the Chief Executive at ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. And Helen is an alum, and also an alum is Jeremy Budd, our Chief Digital Officer and General Manager Sales, alum from IBM Asia Pacific, and Sally Hurd, also an alum, who's Director for the Skill for Social Entrepreneurs, and not an alum, but it feels like he's an alum because he's a frequent visitor to Exeter, and a good friend and associate in helping our students with their employability issues. It's Stephen Isherwood, who's the Chief Executive of the Institute of Student Employers. So before we get stuck into the discussion, I'm just going to ask the panelists if they can just describe what their roles and remits are. Helen, can we start with you, please?
Hi, and hi to everyone on the webinar. So I'm Helen Brand, Chief Executive of ACCA, as Paul said. ACCA is a global body for professional accountants. We have 227,000 fully qualified members and 544,000 students at various levels of qualification all around the world. Around 80,000 of the members and 80,000 of the students are in the UK. of course, ultimately, what we aim for is to promote public good through the contribution that those members and students make to business and societies, and making sure that they're in the right employment is very key to ACCA.
Thank you, Helen. And Jeremy, can we go to you next?
Sure, thank you, Paul. So Jeremy Budd, I've worked for IBM since leaving Exeter in 1985, which is probably before most of the people on the webinar were born. I've just spent 7 years in Singapore. Went out there to run our digital business, all aspects of that, and basically to transform IBM digitally. And while I was there, I also was asked to pick up as general manager of all of our sales across Asia Pacific as well. I'm just returning to the UK now, and will be starting my new role with IBM in March. IBM, as you probably know, leading edge technology provider, particularly around the areas of AI, cloud, security, blockchain. So this last 12 months for us has been a very, very active period with all of our clients. There you go, Paul.
Thank you, Jeremy. And Sally.
Thank you, Paul, and hi to everyone on this webinar. My name is Sally Hurd, and I am now a director at the School for Social Entrepreneurs. I'm actually the founder and CEO, or I previously was the CEO of School for Social Entrepreneurs in Cornwall, and so we have recently undertaken a merge. So I'm getting to my new role, or my new title, throughout this sort of past few months. What we do predominantly is we support people from very early stage, individuals who want to make a change to society, to their local communities, or very sort of local, place-based, but actually right the way through to leadership and influencing. The idea behind what we do is to create a community of change, look at the way we work differently, the way we do things differently, and our approach to the way we do business differently. So my role really is very much looking after what's going on in Cornwall and being sort of the figurehead for that, but really now my role is much broader, and I work nationally and internationally across our SSE network.
Thank you, Sally. And Stephen.
Thanks, Paul. Yep. So my name is Steve Isherwood. So I lead an organisation, the Institute of Student Employers. We're a kind of a trade body, predominantly for employers. So we've got around 300 employer members that we work with. They tend to be the larger employers that do student recruitment in a structured way. Not always sort of the big giant programs. And we're interested in anything really that makes the students market work better. So a lot of the work we do is around transitions through education into work. So we do research into what employers do, how they recruit, the kind of skills they're looking for, what works best in preparing students for that world of work. My own background, I've been doing this for about 8 years, and as Paul said, I've been a frequent visitor to that time in my role. But also previously, my last job before I did this, I used to run graduate recruitment for EY UK and Ireland. So I spent many an evening on Exeter campus over sort of cheese and wine, talking about careers into professional services and accountancy. So look forward to sharing some of our insights this morning with you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. I look forward to those days again where we're having cheese and wine and so on campus with our students. So in the meantime, for those who don't know me, my name is Paul Blackmore, and I'm the divisional head for the Division for Student Employability and Academic Services in the university. Students on the webinar will most likely recognise our services as the Career Zone, Global Opportunities, and frequently see members of our team teaching them in the classrooms, or as it is now, via webinars as part of their degree programmes. So, Matt, if we can close the slides then, and we'll start to make our way some of the hopefully emerging discussion topics. Just to let everyone know on the call, there is a Q&A function. as we've got such a huge agenda, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to answer some of those. So as you'll have seen in the registration slides, that we ask you for various questions, and we've tried to incorporate those in the discussion. But if we've got time to pick those up, we will. But what we'll certainly be doing is capturing those comments and those questions, and we'll be getting back to you. But also, this is going to be really useful in terms of building this information and this interest in terms of the topics we'll follow as part of the Global Hackathon. Okay, so I guess thinking about some of the pressing issues that our students have told us they're concerned with at the moment, one of them is around virtual work experiences. And Stephen, I was wondering whether, from your perspective and the conversations you've been having with your members and employers, whether there's any tips that you could give to students regarding the types of skills and behaviours they'll need for working in the new digital world?
Sure. I think the first thing I would say is that there is still activity in the graduate job market. I know it's a challenging market, and some of the headlines can be a bit gloomy. And it is true, it's a tough market, and vacancies are down, but they're not down by as much as people think. We think overall, round about 85% of graduate recruitment is carrying on as normal through virtual internships, virtual recruitment. So it's very important, I think, to get the message over that people do need to keep engaged in the jobs market. I think what we will find is that there will be a gradual shift as working practices change. We might come on to this a little bit later. Employers don't sort of change the mix of skills they're looking for, immediately. And also, I think it's important to remember that the UK is less technically based in terms of the skills that employers look for than maybe in other markets around the world. I've done some work in Singapore, where Jeremy's based, and employers in places like that, employers in Europe, tend to recruit much more by what you've studied, whereas the UK it's much more generalist. So but having said that, talking to employers, I am seeing that they are placing more emphasis on things like resilience, self-awareness, ability to work under your own kind of steam and motivation. Those things are always there, but if we just think about the practicalities of remote working, I mean, if you think a lot of students who left university last year and started graduate jobs last September, they were going to work for organizations where they'd never been into an office. They've been recruited virtually, onboarded virtually, so having to get adjusted to a very different kind of work structure. And also in a tough economic climate. If I go back to the financial crash, and that's where employers started talking more around these things like resilience, self-awareness. So I think we're seeing a bit of a dialing up of those kind of skills that the employers are looking for.
Excellent. Thanks, Stephen. So yeah, I'm sure our students will be glad to hear about some of those positive aspects of what you said. Okay, so I think given that we've got such excellent speakers from a diverse range of sectors, it'd be useful just to give our students an insight as to how your world is changing as a result of the pandemic. Stephen's given a kind of insight as to how it might change for the students. But yeah, I wonder if we can start with you, Helen, in terms of what your thoughts are in terms of how the pandemic's changed your working environment and that for your colleagues.
Sure. Well, I guess very obviously and immediately it's and we had it. ACCA operates globally, and we have 11 offices in mainland China actually. So when the pandemic broke out initially, we were responding there, and then it swept across globally, and we're still in that situation. So the working from home or not going to the office has been a huge shift. Although we already were used to working different time zones and collaborating from different parts of the world together, not being able to go into formal work environments was a very big shift, which had to be done very quickly. We have a 300-person contact centre, which had to be totally run from people's homes, and that was a very big challenge for technically for our IT teams and everybody to get that in place. But the sector generally, professional services or even finance teams in industry and in the public sector, it does lend itself to home working. So very fortunate from that perspective in terms of being able to continue business and continue working, and you know, ACCA itself in the UK didn't use any of the furlough arrangements because we still had the work to do. We had to deliver it in a different way. The other major impact I'd pull out, of course, is around well-being, or the impact, of course, on individuals, but also as an employer. I think all employers are having to think about that well-being aspect in a far more integrated way, an upfront way than they were maybe doing prior to the pandemic, and thinking around genuinely what flexibility means, what are the pressures for people at home, and it's a wide range of caring, of whether it's people ill through the pandemic, or homeschooling, or whatever the circumstances may be. They were different, and they were certainly putting a lot of pressure on people. So put a tremendous amount of effort, and I've seen this in the employers we work with as well as ourselves, tremendous amount of effort in staying in touch, understanding what the challenges are, giving people time, support mechanisms, whether it's formal counselling or more informal getting together, feeling connected, breaking down that loneliness. So huge effort there, and that's ongoing. That all aspects of health have become extremely important. So I just pull out those two elements to begin with.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, and we often forget about the wellbeing issues, health issues, and in our second session next week, we'll be drilling down more into some of those issues as well. So thank you. That's a great introduction. And Jeremy, do many of those things resonate from your perspective?
No, very much so, and also a number of the points that Stephen made. I think two aspects in particular. So, with regards to our own employees, very much on the points that Stephen was talking about, and Helen mentioned as well, needing to keep the engagement going and making sure that whilst we were working apart, we could still get together and create, whether it's new ideas, whether it's solutions for clients, and just make sure that everyone's still well engaged with the business and with their clients. And you find that some people are very much better at doing that than others. And I think it comes back to the sort of skills that certainly we'll be looking for it more so in the future. How proactive are people? How adaptable are they? How flexible are they? And are they willing to, kind of roll with some of the hits that they're bound to get during their careers? So I think it's a lot of those skills that we've been focusing on with our own people, and I think those are the sort of skills we'll be looking for in future. With regards to clients, of course, they tend to fall into one or two camps. Some industries have been particularly badly hit by the current pandemic. If you think about airlines and travel industry, it's they're having to completely restructure their organizations to be able to cope. Other organizations such as retail, banks, telcos, they've actually seen their business booming because people have been moving to much more of an online way of working. And that's created a huge amount of demand for digital transformation capabilities. And actually, we're seeing a huge amount of demand for skills in those new areas. And I think that's only going to continue. We won't be going back to the old way of working. It'll probably be a hybrid between where we are now and some of the things we've done in the past. And I think there'll be a huge demand for graduates with those sort of capabilities. And the ability to be taught those types of technologies as well. So, I actually think the outlook is positive for graduates leaving university in the next kind of 12 months, because we are going to come through this, and there will be demand for lots of those sort of skills that I think graduates from Exeter will have in spades.
Thank you, Jeremy. And as coming on to your perspective, Sally, and acknowledging, you know, many of the organisations that you work with, the very nature of them being startups in many cases and so on. How's it affecting their particular circumstances, do you think?
I think it's mixed. They're startup and they're sort of scaling also. So I think those organisations who have got that very kind of they're well rooted and they've got their foundations right. You know, this is where it absolutely pays off. So they are able to be very agile, to react to the demands of the pandemic, and to actually take up the opportunities that are there, because there's an awful lot of need out there, and so a number of our social enterprise and social entrepreneurs have really ramped up their operations. But I mean, it would be remiss of me to say that actually some haven't done so well. But those true entrepreneurs, that real entrepreneurial spirit, very much thrives in you know, again in this sort of time of adversity. I think also the way that we have, as an organisation, captured some of that is quite interesting. So, for example, just as the pandemic hit, we were about to deliver on a programme for women, and it was a face-to-face. We're very much a face-to-face organisation, so you know, it was a bit like being hit by a tanker. Suddenly it's like, how do we do this? How do we keep this all going? We put as a team a lot of effort into it, but actually this particular programme for supporting women into social entrepreneurship, we had a real think about it. We thought, oh no, we're going to have to dump it. How are we going to do this? But actually what we did was we asked some of those women, they said an evening delivery really works for us. We've got now the pandemic, you know, we're in lockdown, we've got additional caring responsibilities. We can't do the daytime, but my goodness, we would value a couple of hours in the evening over the course of, say, 12 weeks. And you know, the times that people have said to us as a team, that was an absolute lifesaver for me. It was a bit of sanity in this madness. And so I think my message would be agility. You know, it's about being agile and being able to respond, whether you're a huge corporate or a smaller organisation. It's about having that agility that's so important, I think, and we're learning about all the time.
Thanks, Si. And just staying with you on the on some of the themes that you raised then, that there's a positive aspect to this. We can still connect with people even if we can't connect with them face to face. And thinking about that going forwards, what aspects of the current ways of working that we use do you think will stay after the pandemic subsides?
Well, I can absolutely assure you that I won't be going up to our London office and back in a day for a 2-hour meeting. It's not happening, you know. So the times I've slogged it out, I'm sure you all have too. It doesn't make sense economically, environmentally, or indeed it's not good for your well-being. So you know, that's been dumped as far as I'm concerned, because actually this is a brilliant way of connecting, and our connectivity across the globe, as all of you do, is brilliant. However, I long for the day to go and say to a colleague, oh, let's go for coffee. Let's just chew the cud. Let's just talk some stuff through, because that's when the innovation really kicks in. So I'm not saying for 1 minute I want to stay like this, but I think the elements of this way of working is really gonna be massively, I feel like we've catapulted things forward. This pandemic, as from a work perspective, and a work perspective only, because I'm acutely aware of the horrors, and you know, we're all haunted by that. But from a working perspective, I think in some ways we've catapulted ourselves forwards 5 years. I think, you know, as was mentioned earlier, we don't need to say, oh, please may I work at home for a day. Oh no, it's actually turned it on its head, and I think that gives great autonomy for teams to go and fly, and that's what this is about.
That's great. Thanks, Sally. That was really insightful. And Helen, from your perspective,
I mean,
as Sally said, we can never dismiss the dreadful impacts of the pandemic, but looking for the positives within our ways of working. The way I've been describing it to people is it's democratized the organisation. There is far more capacity for people to be able to contribute, to have their voice heard. We can have people from all over the world in a meeting, whereas we might have had to be very selective for cost reasons, or impact on the environment reasons, or whatever it might be. So we've seen the levels of engagement in the work environment actually go up higher, and all the testing that we're doing with our people in terms of communication, engagement, all of those metrics are going up. So you don't want to lose that. Why would you want to go back to a situation where people are less engaged and less able to contribute, and ultimately from a business perspective you have less ideas, you have less, and we want that diversity of thought, that inclusion piece, which is so important to business now. So we definitely want to keep hold of that, and I don't see it going away. What I do think is that the people long for the contact, they long for the human contact. We're all human beings, and attracting people into the workplace, I think we will need to be able to demonstrate that you can still have that, and that you're going to form those personal relationships and networks that are going to be very important to you throughout your career. And I've been in my career for a long time, so I've had all the advantages of building that up, and I think the next generation entering the workforce will want the same. So we're going to have to find ways of doing that, and employers are already thinking about the creativity that they're going to have to put into the experience. So I think there are a lot of positives. We'll have a hybrid situation. Different roles will have different requirements in terms of people being together more frequently or less frequently, and I think one more positive impact on the environment, that the amount of international travel, again, there will still be some necessary, and I think the more connected we are globally, the more likely we are to combat some of the challenges we do face as global citizens, not just within our own country. But that amount of travel has to stop, and I think this is the opportunity to make that break and to think very clearly about the value and the impact of any of those kinds of activities we undertake.
That's great. Thanks, Helen and Sally. You've hit upon quite a few themes there that we're looking to tease out as part of the globalization and climate change agendas that we'll be looking at during the Global Hackathon. So that's really useful. Thank you. Okay, so Stephen, you mentioned that it's not all doom and gloom in the labour market at the moment, and you gave some examples about the graduate market still being quite buoyant. Is that the same across the piece, or does it differ between different sectors? I know Jeremy just alluded to a couple of examples of that are faring fairly well in Jeremy's world. What are your views in terms of how this is impacting different parts of the economy?
Yeah, it is a mixed picture, and I think one of the problems is, and I've done it myself this morning, I think, which is we generalize about the sort of the jobs market, whereas actually, if you think about it, it's very different sector by sector, and also, some businesses and organisations are doing better than others in this climate. So Jeremy mentioned, travel, airlines, of course they're struggling to keep their own people, existing employees on board and through furlough schemes. So the idea of trying to bring more people in is just a bit of a non-starter at the moment. Yeah. But then there's lots of organisations, and I think in that more professional services sector, so the accountancy firms, the legal sector, they're staying pretty flat at the moment. So they're kind of recruiting the numbers they were typically doing. Similar with the digital sector, again some ups and some slight retracting depending on the organisation. I mean, Jeremy's organisation, IBM in the UK, I mean, they've done a great job. They kept all their placement students. They pivoted very quickly and brought exactly the same number of placement students into the UK last year that they planned to. We've seen particular growth in the public sector, actually, and this was happening a little bit before the pandemic because of extra funding going into health services and policing, but also those programs like Teach First, Police Now, those programs are getting more funding. So there's a general uplift in public sector vacancies at the moment. As I said, also organisations within. So if we look at retail, for example, some retail organisations, really struggling, and we've seen, some very sadly, not be able to survive. But then actually you talk to the food retailers, and actually they've done significant hiring over the last sort of 6 to 9 months to adapt to kind of the new ways that we're approaching sort of food retail. So it really is worth doing your homework on the sectors, and also be flexible. I mean, I alluded to this at the start. Most employers don't necessarily worry about what you've studied. Some do, but not all. So that means that actually you've got quite a lot of choice out there. So in a tough labour market, it's important to stay engaged and also be flexible. I think the other thing I would say is, and I can't put any numbers to this, and it's a sentiment, it's coming from anecdotal conversation. I think there's quite a lot of pent-up demand out there. It's a bit suppressed at the moment because of lockdown, but if I go back to the conversations I was having with employers in November, December, they were talking about actually what the businesses, their business leaders were saying, that once we come out of lockdown and once the vaccination starts to roll out, actually they've got business units that are saying, we're going to need to get some more graduates pretty quickly. So we could see quite a positive bounce back in the springtime. I'm expecting quite a few employers to come back out into the market looking for more hires.
Excellent, thank you, Steve. And in terms of the employers coming back and recruiting again, is it fair to say that the actual ways in which they're recruiting and been forced to recruit because of the pandemic are pretty much going to stay as is going forwards, or would you see some of them coming back onto campus? How do you think that will fare out as the...
In the short term, it will stay virtual. Yeah, all the employers I'm talking to are planning for a pretty much virtual year this year, both in recruitment terms and in the stuff that they're doing. And you mentioned some of that earlier, all the engagements on campus, whether in the curriculums, doing workshops, lots of organizations are putting stuff on their own website. So I think that will stay virtual. And employers have learned how to recruit virtually. We talked about actually how the pandemic has accelerated some things. If you'd asked employers before the pandemic to do an assessment centre online, they'd have gone, no, that's a step too far. Whereas now they've learned how to do it. And I do think some of that will stick because, we talked about the environmental impact, the pain of getting people together, getting onto trains. Somebody who used to run big graduate recruitment programs, you won't believe the hassle it takes to get the office space to even run an assessment centre at a practical level. So all those problems disappear. But I think employers will still want to meet people in person, and people will want to kind of visit the places they'll end up working. So I think we'll see a shift. It's a pendulum. It's swung all the way over here, and it will come back, but it won't go back to where it was before. But we'll have to wait and see just quite how far where that lands.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And like many things, I guess, with the pandemic being so unpredictable. Okay, so Helen, I was wondering whether you had a view on terms of the different skills. We've already talked generally about the skill sets required for this new working environment. From your perspective, representing an organisation which obviously covers a whole series of different markets and employment sectors right across the world, do you see any differences in terms of the specific skill sets that are required in different regions of the world, or is there a commonality?
Yeah, well, the accountancy profession has always benefited from having a global language. It works to international standards, and I think that's been part of the attraction to the profession, that there is a lot of mobility and ability to work across geographies as well as sectors. So we don't tend to see, something being particularly required in India that isn't required in the UK, and they tend to be similar. But what the two biggies, I guess I'd see in additional to the core finance would be around digital, and allying that technical, financial and accounting competence with digital understanding, agility, application, and particularly analysis. So what is the insight you can generate as a professional through the use of digital. And the other would be sustainability. So you know, the finance professional is having to look much further than finance in terms of value creation in an enterprise, and looking at the use of natural capital, intellectual capital, human capital, and the political pressures and public pressures are for businesses to be able to justify their value creation through those lenses, and to understand, first of all, how they're using those capitals to create value, but then the impact that's having in the environments in which they work. So that broad mindset that's going to help steer businesses and hold them accountable, and be able to report to the regulators or governments where businesses work, etc., is a massively evolving part of the role of the professional accountant, which I think makes it really exciting. But it does mean lifting up your head and making sure that you're taking the account of that bigger picture and bringing the skills into it. And then Stephen, Jeremy, Sally and others have all talked about those broader skill sets around communication, leadership, agility, resilience, and that absolutely. But I'd say that goes across all sectors. I think the digital and sustainability piece particularly relevant to professional accountants at the moment.
Excellent, thanks, Helen. And not wishing to put words in your mouth, I guess it's beneficial for any of our students to engage in professional associations like yours earlier rather than later, and get that full appreciation of how they can be supported and the kind of skills they will require.
I think so. There are the many aspects to being part of a professional body, but I think the sooner you're engaged, the sooner you're taking advantage, first of all, of the brand that it's part of your brand. It becomes part of your brand when you hold that professional qualification, as well as your prestigious qualification from Exeter University. You're going to have a professional qualification that signals something to that employer, and we're very focused on employability. Are we providing the relevant skills on an ongoing basis that are going to make you valuable to your employer? So, that being understood by the employer, by you, is really important. There's always been talk of continuing professional development and continuous learning, but now it's absolutely critical. There's no way that any qualification, including a professional qualification that you obtain at a particular point in time, that's going to be it for the rest of your career. And professional bodies are very focused on the future. ACCA and many others, horizon scanning, understanding what's being required by the market, and reskilling existing members. So a lot of our effort doesn't only go into the initial professional qualification, but ensuring whatever direction your career takes you, you've got access to the new learning and skills that you're going to need, and we're very aware of that. And finally, that network, it's another network that you're tapping into. We put a lot of emphasis on mentorship and guidance from those who are further on in their careers. And the number of times I hear our members talk about giving something back, and quite often what they mean about that is guiding and assisting the new entrants to the profession in their careers, and providing them with opportunities and support. So I think all of that adds up to, if we're talking about employability, it adds up to another very important string to your bow, whatever profession you might be in.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Helen. And I guess the next subject I wanted to touch upon, and it'd be remiss of me not to touch upon this, especially having Jeremy on the call, working for IBM, is try and get your views, Jeremy, in terms of how artificial intelligence and digital technologies are impacting on jobs. I mean, they were already impacting on jobs anyway, quite significantly before the pandemic. What's your views on this?
Before I answer that, let me just compliment Sophie Locke, who's on the call, and while this has been going on, she's connected with me on LinkedIn. She's expanded her network, and what a great practice to be able to just build out your network, because you never know You never know when people in your network can help you and when you can help them. Anyway, so terrific, Sophie. Well done. Yeah, look, my own view on this, Paul, is that AI, it really is, and by the way, all of our lives and what we do, how we do things, it's all touched by AI. Okay, it's embedded in all of the technology that we use every single day of the week. Okay, so you know, let's just be clear about that as a starter. But I think it's very much changing how we do things, how we work, and on the back of that, I think it's creating new roles, new opportunities for people who are in work at the moment and who will be looking for work in the coming years. You know, two very simple examples: helping people make much better business decisions on the back of being able to analyze huge amounts of structured and unstructured data to find data patterns, insights, and on the back of that, fix problems, take advantage of new opportunities. The list is endless. Okay, and then you know, if you think about the number of times that we all do business online now, and the number of times that you get offered to have dialogue, sometimes with very simple chatbots, rather than actually talking to someone. You know, it's just a very simple example of how AI is already being used in our daily lives. And to come back to a point that Stephen made, you know, very often I don't think employers look at the specific subject that students have completed, because, and this is back to a point that you and I have been on for about 10 or 12 years now, which is most of the jobs that students are going to do when they leave university don't actually exist when they start university. So it's very hard to train for a job that doesn't exist. So the important things are the point that Helen made: continuous learning. You know, you have to have an open mind about learning things on a daily basis. I'm just being attacked by my my golden doodle here, so you'll just have to. So it's those sort of attributes, and I think if students think carefully about practical examples, practical examples of how they've learnt those skills and they're using those skills during their time at university, those are the sort of things that I think companies look for. It's certainly what I look for. I'm far more interested in the personality of the people we're hiring rather than what specific degree they did, because we can teach people all about AI. We can teach them about any technology subject, but you can't teach people to have that thirst for learning, and you can't teach them to be adaptable and flexible. That's kind of up here. And those are the attributes that I think students should really be focusing on to develop while they're still learning at college.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy. That's I'm sure my colleagues on the call will be really grateful for you saying that, because these are the messages that they're constantly trying to push as well. I mean, that brings it dovetails neatly with another question for yourself, and that was given the fact that a lot of the digital technologies we're using at the moment relate to communication and working and obviously interacting as we're doing now, do you think that affects the importance of these transferable skills anyway? Does it diminish them? Does it make them more important? Are there additional people skills we need, emotional intelligence and our ability to empathize with others? How do you see this panning out for the near future and beyond?
Personally, I think it makes them more important. In the same way that you have to concentrate on how you come across in meetings, in interviews. You know, again, a point that we were on many years ago, which is nail the first 30 seconds, get off on the right foot, because if you don't, it's very, very difficult to come back from that. And I think the same thing applies whether it's phone calls, web meetings, any other media, including social media, by the way. You know, you need to be aware that every single interaction you have with people helps to create that aura around you. Okay, and you know, I think the era we've been through is going to really emphasize the importance of those skills. And back to points that I think Helen, Sally, and Stephen have made, which is this pendulum is going to come back, to use Stephen's phrase, and we'll be in this hybrid situation. But the one thing that I think is going to stay constant is the importance on these transferable skills, and being able to demonstrate that not only have you got those skills naturally, but that you've developed them. And that's what employers look for. They look for how can they apply those skills in the workplace, because the work that people will be doing over the next 10, 20 years, it's going to be constantly changing. I mean, the vast majority of jobs I've done at IBM, I was the first person to do them. No one else had done them before. Okay, and that's one of the reasons I'm still at IBM after 35 years, because I love that kind of constant change and not quite knowing what's coming next. And that's what employees look for.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. That's incredibly insightful. And okay, so yeah, it's thinking about specific areas then. And again, it'd be remiss for me not to ask Sally this question, given the fact that we have so many of our students who are interested in the third sector. I think I've mentioned it on numerous occasions to various colleagues that, and this might be new to our own students, is that LinkedIn did some research on the profiles and population of the volunteering and causes section on LinkedIn profiles. This was several years ago, and Exeter was rated second in the world. Interestingly enough, the other top five were Canadian universities, which kind of fits the stereotype, I think. But so given the interest that our students have in this particular sector, Sally, I wonder if we could just focus a few minutes on looking, or you giving us an awareness of the kinds of services or products that social enterprises tend to deliver. Yeah,
sure. And thanks for all of that, everybody. That was such an exciting conversation. Okay, so predominantly, to my surprise, I'm quite fond of products, but turns out that most social entrepreneurs are responding to a need that they have maybe lived experience of, or they see within their local communities, and sometimes some stuff that's been dropped by the local authority because it's not statutory and they can no longer afford to provide it. So we have to be a bit careful around that. But in sort of general terms, normally services with a few products thrown in. And you know, we run programs for social entrepreneurs you know, as I say, from that very grassroots level right through to sort of leadership, top end level. And we have a plethora of people coming to us with an idea, something they want to take forward. So it might be around, I've just jotted a few down because there are so many, it covers almost everything, but around health and well-being is a key one, as you'll appreciate. But financial services, we've got some incredible people doing some wonderful work around that. Environmental, food and farming, education, and the list goes on. So there's nothing that you can't really do. A little bit of an example. One of our social entrepreneurs, not one that has come through our program in Cornwall, but one through the London team, recognised that, you know, refugees coming in, this is a few years ago, I think it's been set up about 5 years, refugees coming in, that, you know, they didn't have any way of getting around London, transport, etc., around our cities, and he set up Bike Works, which, you know, meant that he was everybody's got a rusty old bike in their garage. He was able to get them together and start to sell them very cheaply or give them to refugees, and that made a massive difference to their lives. So nothing really is off bounds as far as the sector is concerned.
Excellent. I think that'd be really insightful for many of our students as well. Thank you, Sally. Okay, just keeping one eye on the time, and yeah, just thinking now in terms of we've had a lot of positive comments, which has been great from our guests, and which is nice to have a bit of positive news, given that the doom and gloom fest that the newspapers will often take in terms of a perspective. I guess it'd be useful just to kind of start rounding up and thinking about what opportunities you think there are for our students and graduates going forwards, and if you've got any insight in terms of recruitment patterns, great, that they'll be really useful. But I guess just your thoughts really about how to give words of advice to our students and allay some of the anxiety that they might be currently facing in the midst of all these negative kind of news reports and so on. Who'd like to go first on that one?
Do you want me to go first, Paul?
Yeah, go on then, Stephen. You can give that overarching view. Thank you.
Well, it was really good to hear Jeremy's and everybody else's comments, actually, because kind of we produce quite a bit of stuff on skills, and you read stuff. And while Jeremy was talking, I pulled up the World Economic Forum stuff that came out just before Christmas on the future of work, and they talked about the skills that are increasing are critical thinking, problem solving, self-management, working with people. And I don't think that's going to change. So it's good to hear actually on the ground that employers are saying what the research shows. So, and I think the if those of you listening to this looking to enter the world of work, think about that. I mean, you're a good institution, you will get good grades, you will get your degree, as will everybody else graduating. So it is hard at the moment to get things like the part-time work and those internship opportunities. That we can't do anything about that, but there are still things you can be doing. And I've spoken to quite a few students over the last 6 months. People are doing things like volunteering. They can talk about how they might have developed some skills in this particular way online or not, a whole range of different things. And it's being able to make the best of a bad situation, because when the job market does pick up, that's what will you be able to use to differentiate yourself, because employers want to know. I mean, somebody like Jeremy, Helen, Sally, me back in the days when I was recruiting for EY, you want to hire somebody that you think is going to do a good job, somebody that's going to grow with the organization and develop, and somebody's got that little bit of self-starter about them, motivation. I think it's important we think about that, because it's a danger we get wrapped up into sort of fluffy HR language, as it were. So if you put yourselves in the mind of an employer and think about what story you're going to have to tell when you're starting to go for those interviews, I think that's a good way to focus. I mean, I've got quite a few grey hairs, although they're getting thinner and thinner. So I've worked through 2 or 3 recessions now. Recessions end, the job market will pick up. So there's lots of things you can be doing to put yourself in a good position as the recovery starts to take hold.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a really good synopsis. So yeah, conscious of time, I think that's an excellent way to finish. And so again, I couldn't have wished for a better kind of launch event. Genuinely mean that. I think you've had such a rich range of sectors and viewpoints as a result, and obviously very experienced individuals on the call. So I'd just like to thank all of you. Genuinely, that was absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure our students will love investigating and drilling down further into many of these issues. So thank you. Could we have the final reminder slide, please, Matt? And we'll just give students and colleagues on the call a quick reminder. If you want to jump through to, I think it was the 3rd slide, is it? This one? Yeah, that's great. So yes, as I said at the outset, this was a fantastic way of introducing many of the themes and the emerging themes relating to the world of work. And these are just a few examples on the left-hand side of the slide of the experiential learning activities. There's far more than these. You know, it would have taken another an hour's session just to kind of summarise. They're all available on the Exeter ac.uk/Future of Work website. There's even more. These are in addition to the usual raft of activities that you'll find on the careers service site as well. So just to give you an idea, there's 125 events currently live between now and the end of spring. So, you know, plenty to go at, plenty to keep you occupied. And as I said, through some of the great discussions that we've had and the answers we've had from the panel, we'll be delving into those in a bit more detail with our guests on the 18th of February. And again, you can sign up on the Future of Work website with those. Okay, Matt, conscious that we're nearly on the hour, can we have the last slide? And again, yeah, first of all, you keep hearing me say Matt. So Matt, Rachel and Natalie behind the scenes working hard, making sure all the technology works and so on, and keeping us in order. So thanks to them and the webinar events team who will be working frantically to deliver a whole range of activities for you across the spring and the summer period. And yeah, again, as we come to the end of and the close, I just say thank you very much to all of our guests, and much appreciated for your expertise and insights. And thank you to everybody who's taken part in the webinar and will be watching the recording. I hope you all have a nice day.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.